What is up, guys? Hope you guys are doing well. And today I'm going to be starting a series, or hopefully a series, anyways, where I go through kind of in depth predictions and reviews for college football teams for this upcoming 2026 season. So I'm going to be covering uh, hopefully quite a few major teams throughout the big Power Four conferences in college football. So SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12. And then just going through, things that went right for them last year, things that went wrong, who their key players are, their schedule, and ultimately how I think they'll perform in this upcoming year. So, hope you guys are excited, and let's get right into it. So, the first team that I have for us, and the first team that I'm going to be covering today, is Texas. So, Texas obviously went 10-3 last year, took some rough losses in the opening few weeks of the season, and they opened up 0-2 against Power 4 teams. They lost to Ohio State and then Florida. They were the number one preseason team in the AP poll, and at some points, I think they dropped completely out of the rankings. I think maybe for 1 week, but I think they got back in quite soon after that. They picked up a bit in October and beginning of November, and then lost to Georgia, which was ultimately the loss that kept them out of the CFP. Won some big ones later on in the year, such as obviously Texas A&M. Got that win at home, and they were the first team to beat the Aggies in 25, and then ended up winning the Citrus Bowl over Michigan on their way to a 10-3 season. So they were 10-3, 6-2 in the SEC, and I think they were either the third or fourth team out of the CFP picture. In terms of coaches, Steve Sarkisian is back, obviously. Their offensive coordinator, Kyle Flood, is back. Their defensive coordinator has changed. They fired Pete Kwiatkowski, who was their defensive coordinator these last few years, and now they bring back Will Muschamp. He was the head coach at Florida and South Carolina for different times. He has been the Texas defensive coordinator before, from 2008 to 2010, and now he is back for hopefully a more successful and much longer second stint here. In terms of the key team statistics, they weren't too bad. They weren't exceptionally good or exceptionally bad in any one major statistic, which, by the way, those statistics I'm looking at are points per game, pass yards per game, rush yards per game, and total yards per game for both offense and defense, obviously. One that was a little worse than maybe they had hoped or anticipated was defensive pass yards per game. One thing they struggled with last year was letting up big plays, and that ultimately cost them in a few of their losses. So let's go through the schedule here, and then I'll go through the players next. We got Texas State at home to open up, so no big week one opener for them. They do have a big week two, though, against Ohio State. That is also at home. UTSA at home. They're not on the road until week four, which is Tennessee. They had their bye in week five. Week six is going to be Oklahoma, obviously, at the Cotton Bowl. Week seven, I believe, is going to be Florida at home. Week eight is interesting. Ole Miss at home. I feel like those two haven't linked up here in recent years, although I guess Texas hasn't been in the SEC for all too long either. What is this, week 8 now? Or no, this is week 9, I think. Week 9, home against Mississippi State. Interestingly enough, the schedule, which I guess makes sense, has kind of flipped from last year in terms of home and away. Last year, I don't think they had a home game in October, and then they had like three or four in November. This year in October, they don't have a true away game. The only time they're away from Austin, Texas is Oklahoma, which is a neutral site game, obviously. But then in November, they have 3 out of 4 games on the road, and those are all true road games. So they have Mizzou on the road, which isn't an extremely daunting road environment, all things considered, in the SEC. LSU on the road, that certainly is. Arkansas is their last home game, and then they've brought the Lone Star Showdown back to Black Friday on the 27th. That will be at Kyle Field again this year. So I'll get into game by game predictions in a bit. But first, let's go over some key departures and then some key players to look out for this upcoming year. So, obviously, quarterback position, no key losses there. Arch Manning is back, and if they did lose anybody else, they weren't really too important to report on, unfortunately. Their running back room, however, was completely decimated. I think here they lost their top 4 running backs from this last year, and some of them didn't even have great years. For example, Quintravion Wisner was 1,000-yard rusher in 2024, not last year. He was still their leading rusher last year, but he had 1,064 yards in 2024. Numbers went a bit down last year, but as I said, he was still the leading rusher. He's at Florida State now. C.J. Baxter, he had a great, I think, true freshman year in 2023 with the Longhorns for 659 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he transferred to Kentucky. Kentucky's going to be a fun team to watch. Maybe not this year necessarily, but I think Will Stein's got them in the right direction for coming years, so we'll see how the trajectory of that program goes. But as I said, competing in year one in the SEC is going to be hard, especially for a team who is certainly in a bit of a downward spiral as a program right now. Jarek Gibson and Christian Clark both leaving as well. In the wide receiver room, DeAndre Moore and Parker Livingston both transferring. DeAndre Moore to Colorado, Parker Livingston to Oklahoma. Again, I think this is the second or third time that I've talked about a player transferring to a complete bitter rival, which is ridiculous, but that's just what we can expect now. Jack Endry's not transferring, he got drafted. Did transfer to Texas, but he got drafted by Cincinnati in the 7th round. As I'm going to talk about here in a bit, the tight end room is going to be one of the weaker spots for Texas. They've had strong tight end options in recent years, but this year not so much. But certainly with that being said, there is room for some lesser known name to step up. So always can look at the positives there. And then on the offensive line, DJ Campbell, drafted by Miami in round 6. Connor Stroh transferring to Kansas. And Neto Umeozulu transferring to North Texas. All those guys were key departures for the Horns this past year. Defensively, Ethan Burke signed by Baltimore as a UDFA. He was a defensive end. Cole Brevard signed to Kansas City as a UDFA as well. He's a defensive tackle. Anthony Hill Jr. was the Horns' highest draft pick. He had 113 total tackles, 16.5 TFLs and 8 sacks, just to name a few, in 2024, which I think was statistically his best year. He was a 2 time second team All American, so a huge loss for Texas. As I said, he was their highest draft pick in this past draft. He went in round 2 to the Tennessee Titans. Trey Moore, who was the 2023 AAC DPOY at UTSA. It's a lot of acronyms there. The American Conference Defensive Player of the Year at UTSA, and then transferred to Texas for 2 years. He was drafted by Miami in round 4. Jalen Gilbo signed by Carolina. Malik Muhammad taken in round 4 by the Bears, and also the first team All American and first team All SEC safety Michael Taff, who came in as a walk on and proved just about everybody wrong there. He was drafted by the Dolphins in the 5th round. So they do lose a few key pieces from last year's defense, but it was a defense that arguably got their defensive coordinator fired, so take that as you will. But they do lose some key players as well on both sides of the ball, really. And special teams, they also lose their kicker and their punter, but they bring in transfers for both of those positions, so they should be restocked there. Some top recruits to be looking out for. The top get for the Horns was the number 18 overall player on 24/7 Sports Composite. That was quarterback Dia Bell. According to 24/7 Sports Composite, they brought in 3 5-stars, so Bell was one of them. Tyler Atkinson, a linebacker from Georgia, and Richard Wesley was an edge, or is an edge, from California. One guy to look out for, Derek Cooper, especially, as I said, with the running back room being so depleted. He's a 4-star running back from Hollywood, Florida. Yeah, with the running back room the way it is, they did bring in 2 transfers who I'm going to get to here in a bit, but he could be a 3rd-string running back as a freshman, and that would probably see him get some playing time. So he's one to look out for sure, for Texas this year. Now looking at the starting lineup, or at least some key guys here. So the quarterback is obviously Arch Manning for the 2nd year in a row. Not a great start, all things considered, to the season last year. Put up 7 points against Ohio State, and then even struggled to score a lot against teams like San Jose State and UTEP at the beginning of the season, and then took another tough loss to Florida, and they were 3-2, including 0-2 on the road. But he definitely picked up, and they started putting up some higher numbers as the year went on against teams like Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Arkansas. I guess everybody was putting up points against Arkansas, but that's besides the point there. But I think, part of it was probably, to be fair, he was dealing with almost unrealistic expectations for what a year 1 quarterback could do. So I think he will be much improved this year. He'll be, certainly a guy to watch, but he's going to be the focal point of this Texas offense. Although the running back room is depleted, they do bring in 2 guys who were both first team all conference in their respective conferences from the transfer portal. The starter is slated to be Hollywood Smothers. He had 939 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns for NC State last year. Also came from Oklahoma before then, but he was 2025 first team All ACC. Not listed here, but also definitely worthy of mentioning. Raleek Brown was a 1,000-yard rusher last year at Arizona State, and he was first team All Big 12 as well. The wide receiver room is going to be pretty solid. They bring back, I think, two of their top 3 two of the top four receivers from last year. Ryan Wingo was the leader, and Emmett Mosley was fourth. Although I think statistically he had a better year with Stanford in his freshman year, but he's going to be more acclimated to the system now and everything, so he'll have maybe not statistically a better year. I would say statistically a better year, but now competing with both Wingo and Cam Coleman, who comes in from Auburn, that might be a tricky thing to do. But not to mention, Ryan Wingo was also second team All SEC last year. Cam Coleman, as I said, comes in from Auburn. He had 708 receiving yards last year with the Tigers, and he's been there 2 years, so this is his third collegiate year. So you got three guys in this wide receiver room who have all had 500-yard seasons at the collegiate level. So it's going to be an impressive wide receiver room for the Horns this year. With that being said, that is going to be important because the tight end position is one of my biggest questions for the Horns this year. The starters projected to be Nick Townsend, who had 2 catches for 7 yards last year. Definitely not a stat that jumps off the page. Michael Masunis, I believe he's a Michigan State transfer. He could get some decent reps in there as well, but as I said, the departure of Jack Endries really hurt the tight end room, and they don't really have an immediate replacement right now at that position. For offensive line, Trevor Gooseby was first team All SEC last year, played 15 games in 24, 13 last year, so he's been a critical part of this Texas offense for at least the last 2 years. He will be again this year. At left guard, they bring in a well-traveled candidate, I'll say, Lawrence Seymour. He was first team All-Conference USA last year for Western Kentucky. Shout out Western Kentucky, by the way, the Hilltoppers. Great mascot. If you haven't checked it out, I'd highly suggest. He was at the U from 21 to 22, which honestly I don't really remember him. No disrespect to him. I think he did appear in some games, so maybe I just wasn't watching closely enough. Akron from 23 to 24, Western Kentucky, so that makes Texas his fourth collegiate stop this year. I'd have to imagine it's his last as well. I don't know where this eligibility is coming from, but it's coming. It's coming for Lawrence Seymour, so well done for him. Connor Robertson played in 13 games last year. He's going to be the center. Brandon Baker played 13 games at right tackle last year. He's going to be moving to right guard. And then Melvin Ciani comes in from Wake Forest. He played 13 games at left tackle last year for the Demon Deacons. Also a previous stop for him at Temple. So there's your offensive line. Should be a pretty solid unit, I think, for the Longhorns this year. I mean, you got three guys who are returning and then 2 guys who came in from the portal but have credible experience. So should be a pretty solid offensive line unit this year. Moving on to the defense, Lance Jackson was on the SEC All-Freshman team last year. Ian Jeffrard comes over from Arkansas the last 3 years. He's going to be the nose tackle. Defensive tackle, Hiro Kanu. He is a national champion. He was at Ohio State for the first 3 years of his career and then came over to Texas last year after winning the national championship. The highlight of this defensive line is obviously going to be Colin Simmons. Simmons, a second-team All-American and a first-team All-SEC last year. 43 tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss, and 12 sacks for the Horns last year, so he's going to be one to watch for sure. Another guy to watch, not a returning man, but a transfer portal get in the offseason for Texas, is linebacker Rasheem Biles. He is an electric force in that linebacker room. He's going to provide some stability and maybe be the replacement, if you will, or at least, the next man up as Anthony Hill departures in the offseason. But he had 101 total tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. He scored 3 touchdowns last year. He had a fumble return touchdown and 2 pick sixes. So that just shows you the impact he has on the field, and that got him second team All ACC last year with Pittsburgh. So that's a huge get out of the transfer portal, and he'll be certainly a guy to keep your eye out on, or a guy to keep your eye out for Texas in this upcoming year when the defense takes the field. Let's see here. Bo Masco comes in, moving into the secondary now. Bo Masco comes in from Rutgers. He was honorable mention All Big Ten last year with the Scarlet Knights. He has 3 years of experience there with Rutgers. And then in the secondary here, Jelani McDonald. He was the leading tackler for the Longhorns last year with 80. He's returning Cade Phillips and Xavier Filsame, 2 lesser experienced guys maybe, but 2 guys who are looking to prove themselves with bigger roles here in 2026. And then from a special teams perspective, as I said, 2 transfers. Gianni Spetic is supposed to be the kicker this year. Had a pretty solid year at Memphis. He was at Ohio University for 2 years before that, and then Memphis last year. And then Mac Chiumento. By the way, I'm not claiming that all of these names are pronounced correctly, so check me on that at your will. But 27 punts last year for Florida State. I think I read something. Florida State punted the least amount of times in program history last year. 27 punts for Chiumento. He was the starter last year for the Seminoles at that position, so that's interesting. I'm not totally sure what that means. I think it's a mix of, maybe good offense and also aggressive play calling, or just going for it on 4th down a bunch. So maybe a mix of several things there, but yeah, so that is the starting lineup for Texas. So ultimately, what do I think is going to happen here with this schedule? So they start with Texas State. I don't know if I have to say much more. Texas State's a good team. Their head coach, G.J. Kinney, GJ. It's a tricky name there, but I like what he's doing with the Bobcats. They're not like a well-known program. They haven't had a lot of national prevalence, but he's gotten them to a couple bowl games, I think. So I think he's doing well there in San Marcos. And they move to the Pac-12 this year, which should be interesting. They move out of the Sun Belt into the Pac-12, so should be an interesting transition there for the Bobcats. But regardless, Texas State, they're in different leagues. I've got Texas here, that's 1-0. Ohio State, this is an interesting one. Obviously, these 2 teams have met in the last 2 seasons. 2024, it was at a neutral site in the CFP semifinals. Ohio State won that. They went to Columbus last year. Ohio State won that in the first week of the season. Now they come to Austin, and unfortunately, I've got the same thing happening. I think Ohio State gets a resume bolstering win in Austin in week 2, and Texas falls prey as they did last year to early season struggles. So I've got Ohio State taking that one. UTSA, another group of five program that's easy to get behind. Unfortunately, it's more difficult to get behind them here. I've got Texas taking that one. They go on the road to Tennessee. Um, Tennessee maybe, I think, a bit of uncertainty at the QB position. I'm not totally sure how they're going to be this year. I think they might take a bit of a step back, but Josh Heupel, he's got the program in a positive direction here this year. So even with so much uncertainty at the quarterback position last year with Iama Leava leaving in what was it, like April of last year. They went out, they got Joey Aguilar, who was at UCLA before that, and they did pretty well last year. So um, I think it's a solid program, but I think they're taking a bit of a step back, and I think Texas goes out and gets a big road win there. So I think they improve to 3-1 before the bye. That moves them into October, which, as I said, they don't have a true road game in this month in 4 games. They start with Oklahoma at a neutral site. Texas has won the last 2 Red River rivalries, and I think I have this one going the same way. I need to see Oklahoma with an improved offense. I mean, they were they were heating up at the beginning of last year, but the end, they could not get things going on that side of the ball. And maybe some of that has to do with the John Mateer injury to, I think, the thumb or one of his fingers, I think it was. And he really just wasn't the same after that. But I need to see more from that Oklahoma offense before I can predict differently. I've got Texas winning this one in the Cotton Bowl this year in Dallas. Florida, Mississippi, or Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I think I've got all 3 of those as wins as well for Texas, which will put them at 7-1, moving into a difficult spot here in November, with 3 out of 4 games, as I said, being on the road. But they're 7-1 moving into that month. I think they are without an SEC loss. Again, just my prediction could be totally off, but it's what I'm sticking with. So 7-1, undefeated record in the SEC. You have Mizzou, LSU, Arkansas, Texas A&M. Mizzou on the road, I think that's a win. Yeah, I think that's a win for the Longhorns. They're certainly going to be tested much more on the road, such as with LSU. LSU's season just could go in 17 different directions, and it's so hard to tell which one. I mean, I think they hardly have any returning starters. The team is just built out of the transfer portal, but that's just the way Lane Kiffin does it. I'm going to have Texas going into Tiger Stadium and pulling out a win. I'd be shocked if that's not a night game, but I'm going to have the Longhorns going into Baton Rouge pulling out a win there. I think they get it done. I think they have what it takes. They have experience. They have the poise to get it done with more, just mature, more experienced players. I think they get that one done. Arkansas at home, this one probably the easiest SEC game of the bunch. Maybe Mississippi State as well, but those 2, I think 1A and 1B should be pretty simple games to handle. I think they get that done as well. And then Texas A&M on the road should be an interesting one. The crowd is going to be behind the Aggies there. It's a road environment. but I've got them getting that done as well. I think 11-1 for Texas, which, you know, an 8-0 SEC record, it sounds too good to be true, and in all honesty, it probably is. It probably is, but I'm sticking with it. If they go 8-0 in SEC play, you heard it here first. Maybe you didn't, I don't know, but I'm sticking with that 11-1, 8-0 in SEC play, which, barring some crazy tiebreak, would be enough to get them into the SEC championship. And for that matter, if they go 11-1, they're making the CFP. There's no question about that. A 10-3 Alabama team almost made it. So if they go 11-1, even if they lose the SEC championship game, they're making it in. So that is all I have for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. I'm honestly not sure who I'm going to do next, but probably a Big Ten team. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that one, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.